with a ratatouille and fresh pasta. We're going to do kind of a basil, oregano, kind of fresh herby base for our salmon. And we're going to bake up some of our sourdough for dinner. So we'll flip this loaf out. Oop. And perfect. And then we're going to give this a nice score. Scrape off some of my flour. We're awfully, there we go. And then do our little simplicity. There we go. And then we're going to pop it in our, tongue tied here, we're going to pop it in our Dutch oven that we've had nice and toasty. As you can see, we've got kind of the heat rising up out of this. And we're going to bake it at 500 with the lid on for 20 minutes. Then we'll remove the lid and we'll bake it for 450 with the lid off for 20 minutes. And this will be a perfect little delicious bread to go with our little salmon pasta dinner on here. So we'll give this a nice hop in there. So we're going to set the timer for 20 minutes at 500 degrees. There we go. And now we can start prepping our pasta. We'll make our little marinade for our salmon so it can kind of sit there. And we'll prep our vegetables for our ratatouille that we're going to make on here. So I've got some gemelli pasta that we're going to boil up. We're not going to use quite the whole bag because that's a lot of pasta. But we'll use about 2/3. Let me turn that up to a nice boil. And we're just going to actually do a really light kind of herby base to our pasta. So I'm going to put a little bit of salt in our water because we're going to use a little bit of that starchy water in the base of our pasta as well. And we'll give it a nice little toss. Let me get my little pasta spoon. Give it a good stir. And we'll let that come to a nice boil. Now let's whip up our herb base. We're going to use this both on our salmon and on our pasta, but we have fresh oregano. So I've got like a whole tree of oregano here. We're going to take off our leaves. And try to get as much of them. It's okay if you get a little bit of those stems, but try to get the really firm stems off on here. Try to cut this. It's a little hard to manage when it's practically a tree. And we're going to kind of slide this off completely and get each of these little bits. There we go. And taking out these stems, and we're going to mince this up so that when we're going to mince this up nicely with some garlic and some fresh basil, and we'll kind of rub this all over our salmon that we're going to kind of cut up in fillets, and then we're going to just do a nice pan sear on our salmon here. This is about around 2 ounces, or not 2 ounces, around 2 pounds of salmon, so a nice big fillet here. I'm going to break up some fresh basil leaves. Here. And pop that out. Get these big little stems off. But we're going to mince it up. And then, of course, some garlic. And I'm going to get probably, a good little handful of garlic, about around 6 good-sized cloves. I've got a couple small ones here. About a 1/4 cup of basil once it's all kind of chopped up, and a tablespoon of oregano. So A lot of great fresh herbs that will really come through in this salmon. We're also going to use, again, these in our pasta. So just a really fresh dish, which will be lovely and nice. Kind of another healthy, fresh kind of dish for the new year, for those of you who want to start off eating a little bit healthier, especially, or just lighter after having so much rich food. It was like when my mom came back from Germany after being there for about 10 days, and she was like, I've just been craving a salad. She goes, had so much good food, but it was such rich food. All I wanted is some nice light green veggies. You know, she was just like, just something light and different. And I feel like that's what it is. The holidays it's everybody's like favorite homey foods. You know, you got your casseroles and your mac and cheeses, mashed potatoes, roasts, you know, rolls, everything that makes you feel comfortable. And, you know, but it's heavier food. So it's nice to have something a little bit lighter. So let's mince this up nice and fine. We're going to get this a nice herby paste. And then we'll put it in a bowl. We'll add a little bit of garlic salt and some oil and a little squeeze of lemon juice. Maybe a little bit of lemon zest. I won't go too strong on the lemon zest. I told you my 14-year-old son, he knows, he can sense when I use lemon anytime. He doesn't mind it if it's minor, but he doesn't like it if I go too heavy on the lemon. Here we go. I think we should be good enough with that. So we've got kind of our little mountain here. Let me grab a small bowl. And that looks like, let me grab my garlic salt over here. But I'll grab a bowl, a garlic salt, and I forgot the lemon. So let me grab a lemon out. There we go. And we're going to scoop this up in a bowl. So we've got all these great herbs and that fresh garlic. And I'm going to use a little bit of my lemon zest. I'm going to put it in there, and then we'll squeeze a little bit of lemon as well. But that zest will add a little bit more brightness to the...
I have a question. How was the French onion soup?
Oh, it was so delicious. It's one of my favorite soups, and it was so nice. And just to dip the little cheesy sourdough bread in, and the meatballs were delicious. That was my husband's favorite part. He ate primarily meatballs on there, and the muffins have been a hit. There's already quite a few of them missing, so that was good. I always like to, you know, when I try to go a little bit healthier on something, you know, sneak in a little bit more things. I always try to go little by little so that my kids don't instantly, you know, pull back. You know, if you try to put spinach in your muffins right away, they're like, why are they green? And I'm like, you can't even taste the spinach, but they can. Even if you put one leaf in and it's barely green, they can taste it. We'll add in a little squeeze of our fresh lemon juice in here. Just about a third of our lemon. We don't need a whole lot. Squeeze that up into it. Then we're going to add a splash of olive oil in here. And then we'll mix this up and then add a little bit of garlic salt. And this is what we're going to add for our salmon. It's a nice kind of herby glaze. Let me grab a spoon here so we can mix it up. Give it a nice kind of stir. Add a little bit more olive oil. And in here we have garlic, basil, oregano, a splash of lemon juice, some lemon zest, and we're now going to add some little garlic salt, but just some really great fresh herbs to really liven up our salmon. So about a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt. There we go. Now, what we don't use, so when we put this on our salmon, we're just going to drop it on, because what we don't use, we can use to make a little sauce later that we can add on, kind of like almost like a chimichurri sauce, to add on a little extra flavor at the end. Because as I say, my daughter is very much about flavor with sauces, and gravies. She loves that. Okay. Let me cut because we're going to marinate, but I'm going to cut them into fillets first. That way we can rub this sauce on this herby paste on the sides and really get the flavor in. So we're going to cut our fillet up into our little portions here. And there. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I always mess up slightly along the way. There we go. Kind of perfect for it. And let's get this seasoned up. So I'm going to just take my paste in here. I'm going to just put a little spoonful on each one. I'm not going to touch my salmon with it. That way I don't contaminate my herb paste, and I can use this paste, what's left over, to make like a nice little herby, kind of like a semi version of a chimichurri paste. But we'll add a little bit more lemon juice, garlic, salt, and olive oil later. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to use our hands, and you're going to just pat it all the way around and really coat each one up. Now this salmon has skin on the bottom, so we're only going to season one side. If you have skinless, then just season both sides. That way you get more flavor all the way around. There we go. And let that really soak up into our salmon. Okay. Wash my hands. And let's give our pasta a quick stir over here. It's got a good boil on it. Once it gets close to being done, we will reserve a little bit of that starchy water to make for our pasta on here. We added a little bit of salt here, but I always like to just sprinkle a light dusting over each one, just to add that right little touch to it. We're going to let them sit and marinate. Salmon, like most fish, takes hardly any time to cook up. So we won't cook this up until the end, till the last kind of 10 minutes after we've kind of done our sourdough, the second part. That way it won't get cold. While we're waiting, let's prep our vegetables that are going to go for our ratatouille base for our pasta. Let's get a little bit of our garlic. We'll dice up our onions. We have zucchini, tomatoes, sweet peppers, and mushrooms. So I almost was going to I have an eggplant. I have one eggplant, but I opted not to put it in here because I want to do an eggplant for another dish. So we're kind of partially there, but similar. And it's one of these dishes that ever since the movie Ratatouille came out, my son loves it. And he always asks me, can you make a ratatouille? Can you make a ratatouille? And I always am like, but do you actually like it? And he really does. He's my 14-year-old, and he actually has, out of my kids, I think he has the best palate for the most part. Now, he sometimes gets a little, specific about things. Like he doesn't like sourdough for the most part, but it's mental because if I tell him something's not sourdough, and he'll be like, oh, this is good. But if he thinks it's sourdough, then he's like, I don't like it. It's a mind thing. But then I'm like, his favorite bread at the Cheesecake Factory is the sourdough one. And I'm like, that's sourdough bread, buddy. And he's like, That's how, kids are. Okay, we've got our diced up onions here. I'm kind of leaving them a little bit bigger because with a ratatouille, you kind of have bigger chunks of vegetables. We're going to mince up our garlic here. I've got a good amount of garlic because that garlic is going to really infuse into our sauce and be one of those kind of strong flavors for this. So we want it to be bold and beautiful.
Can you go over what's on the salmon?
Yes. So we made a lovely herby marinade using fresh oregano, basil, garlic, lemon zest, and lemon juice, a little bit of olive oil, and garlic salt. and kind of rubbed it over our salmon fillets and letting it just kind of seep in those flavors, and then we'll sear them off in a little bit. But salmon takes hardly any time to cook, so we'll do that for the last part. Let's give this a good mincy mince, and then we'll check our pasta noodles. We'll get all of our veggie prep. It's kind of like the nice thing when you're cooking sourdough, which is so nice to have like a fresh loaf is my method that I use is the 20 and 20 minutes with the lid on at 500. And that's kind of like get everything prepped in that first 20 minutes. And then the second 20 minutes is kind of your guide to, okay, let's put all those pieces together. That's kind of how you get everything. So it keeps you on track during your meal thing so that everything can turn out ready and perfect at the end. So it's all served hot. So you're not guessing when to get things done at different times. And so it's really helpful with doing that. Plus the bonus of having fresh sourdough bread, which who doesn't love? We're going to do our sweet peppers. We've got some yellow, orange. I try to pick out all the pretty colored ones. Add lots of fun pops of color to our ratatouille. And nice thing about using sweet peppers over bell peppers is they have hardly any seeds, so you don't have to do as much work with them. And they're not quite as bitter. We'll slice these down, and then again, I'm going to do not a super big chop on them, not like I did the other day when I did pepper steak, but similar to my onions, a slightly larger dice. That way you have just nice, good kind of bits of peppers. We'll just kind of go through and chop them all up first. Let me get a little bit of the insides out. One more. And again, these are sweet peppers. You can use bell peppers as well. So just nice, kind of slightly larger dicing. That way you'll have nice little chunks of veggies throughout our pasta. There we go. We'll have these all ready to saute off. Let's check our noodles. See? Perfect. When you're cooking your noodles, you don't want to cook them completely to like al dente. You want to do them a smidge before, because we'll be making this lovely sauce, and I throw my noodles back into the sauce, which means they're going to absorb some of that liquid. So you don't want your noodles to be overcooked. You want them to be right there at al dente, just a smidge before, so that they can absorb that extra liquid, which will be then allow them to be the perfect doneness when they absorb some of the sauce, which gives them more flavor. There we go. And I'm a big proponent of having my pasta mixed into my sauce. Growing up, I feel like the way 90s spaghetti was you had your tomato sauce that had your hamburger, in it, and then you had your noodles in a separate bowl or pot on the side. And then you stored them that way. And then your noodles always formed into one big blob of noodle. And I mix everything together. And that way the noodles all are like infused with the sauce. And so leftovers the next day are even better. Let's get these strained. Give them a good shaky shake. Get our residual liquid out. And then we can pop them on here. And we can bring over, this is my 6-quart saute pan. I like to call it my pasta pan because I make almost all my pasta dishes in this pan because it's nice and has a good lip to it. So we're going to add in a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to turn my heat on to about a 6, so it's just like a medium high. Or since it's a good pan size, I'm going to do about a tablespoon or so, and we might add a little bit more in a little bit. Swirl it around, kind of get a nice coating on it. And then we can get our onions in here sauteing up, get those caramelizing and bringing out those flavors. Go. Let's get some tongs. Kind of toss them around. I'm going to add maybe a smidge more since I oiled, because this is a pretty big pan. And I don't want it to look, oil is kind of going to be the base fat for this sauce on here. So I want to have enough to kind of saute all of my vegetables through. And you don't want to have too dry of a pan, or you're going to risk burning some of your vegetables. Here we go. Looks like I got a little bit of oregano already in there. That's before I move to the next step. We've got 20 seconds left on our sourdough, so let's start heading over there to take the lid off, and then we can start working on the second half of our dinner. Grab this. Okay, so let's take our timer off. So we baked for 20 minutes at 500 degrees. Now we are going to take the lid off, and we will bake at 450 for 20 minutes with the lid off. Look at our nice, beautiful little peak there. And the reason you do 500 with the lid on is to kind of seal in the moisture when you're baking, and that way you don't have to add any extra moisture or water into it. And then when you take the lid off is to give it a nice golden crust. So 20 minutes now, and then our bread should be done, and hopefully our pasta and salmon are about done at that time as well. Okay, let's give our onions, I'm going to turn this down just a smidge. We'll give our onions a nice stir. Okay. Got them kind of caramelizing up, bringing there. Looking at them now, cooking on about a 4. Now the difference between when we cook on an all metal pan versus a non-stick pan like the Hexclad is the metal pan like the All-Clad is going to conduct heat a lot faster, which means this is going to be hot faster. So you're going to want to turn it down and cook a little bit lower so you don't burn your food as you cook it. You want to heat it up high and then turn it down. Otherwise, don't forget about it, because you will burn there pretty quickly for it, because it does conduct a lot faster. But that means it also will give you a really lovely sear on your food as well. Let's get our peppers in, since our onions are looking pretty nice. Once our peppers are cooked up, we'll do our garlic, then we'll add in our mushrooms, zucchini, and then last our tomatoes, and then fresh herbs, and then some of our pasta water and garlic salt, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, a little bit of lemon zest. And that should be the base of our sauce. Just a really simple kind of light sauce on here. There we go. Now let's get our mushrooms going. When you're sauteing up vegetables, I always start with onions, because onions need a minute for themselves in the pan. And then I go to firmest or hardest to then softest and wettest. So our order of operations were onions to peppers, then we're going to do garlic, and then mushrooms, zucchini, and tomatoes. So zucchini and mushrooms, while they might be similar in texture, zucchini has more liquid in it, so I want the mushrooms to saute up nicer first. And that way each vegetable will get a nice saute on it. I don't ever like to just throw all the veggies in the pan at one time, because they don't saute up nicely when you do it that way, because onions and peppers need more time. Onions are the finicky one. They really need their little moment to shine to bring out their flavor.
I have a question. Do all the kids eat everything each night?
I have one child that is a perpetual every single day. She goes, oh, that's what we're having for dinner. Now she's happy because we're having salmon and she loves salmon and she likes the noodles. She'll pick around the vegetables. She'll eat the peppers out of this and the tomatoes. But no, I definitely have a very finicky one. I am not a short order cook. I make one meal for the whole family. I make sure that there are components that all kids like on it. We do offer fresh fruit every single night with our dinner as well. But I think that's my way of getting them to expand their palate and eat a variety of food. And all I ask is for them to try and bite every single time because their palates change as they get older, their taste buds change. They get less sensitive the older they get. We've got our garlic going in here. I'm going to add a splash of olive oil right into my little puddle of my garlic. That way it can saute up and infuse in there. On it. But now, for the most part, most of them eat really well, but my 10-year-old, and I think it really is a phase, all of my kids kind of from 7 to 11 have been really challenging eaters.
And what are the ages?
So I have 2, 4, 10, 14, and 15, soon to be 16. So we got we've got every like developmental stage. You know, we're kind of a glutton for punishment here. We decided we wanted to start over once they were all like in school. Let's have babies again. And I mean, we love every minute of it, but whew, it is definitely, fun on there. But no, we have this wide variety. I am like secretly loving one thing. My daughter, my oldest, is about to turn 16, and the freedom that she will be able to drive soon is like, oh, can't wait. Now I have 1,000,001 bumper stickers on the back of my car being like, beware, student driver, new one, avoid at all costs. So, I am warning everybody out there that she is there, but that freedom of just not having to drive to another soccer practice or a sports one, like, to kind of ease off on that burden is really nice. Okay, let's get our salmon going. I'm going to start heating up my pan. I'm going to put a nice drizzle of olive oil in here. We don't need too much because we are using a nonstick pan, but just a good kind of smattering to cover the whole little basin. I'm going to give it a good swirl. And then I'm going to let it sit for just a few and get nice and hot before we pop our salmon in. We are going to drop our salmon in presentation side down first, which means the top goes down, the skin goes up. That way it gets a nice kind of sear off and beautiful kind of cook on it. So I just dropped our mushrooms in. We're going to kind of coat these up and let them get a nice saute on them. We're going to sprinkle them with a little bit of garlic salt in a second, but I want them to get a little saute on their own. The salt will help them release their juices, but I always give them a moment to saute on their own before I help them naturally get that nice thing. So spread them out. I'm going to turn my heat up to about a 5 now that I've popped in a good amount of veggies in here. We'll let those going. And let's get our zucchini chopped up. So I'm going to quarter my zucchini here. So we'll just slice it down and then we'll kind of just chop it into nice little pieces. I don't cut them too thin because when you saute them, if they're too thin, then they kind of just turn to mush. You want them to be able to saute but still hold their body a little bit. But I don't want them too thick where they don't get tender enough. So it's kind of like this nice happy medium on there. There we go. Get these guys going. Now we're gonna let our mushroom saute for a little bit before we pop these in. Again, my order is I did the mushrooms before the zucchini because the zucchini has more liquid in them and they will release more water into the pan. And so we don't want them to bring out their juices, which means our mushroom won't get a good saute on them.
I say they have to get time to go over your order that you do.
Yes.
Vegetables.
So when I'm sauteing my pans, there's kind of an order so that you can release out the best flavors. So you always start with your onion. That is my core vegetable that I start with when I'm sauteing. Onion first. And then I go to my next, if I have them, my next aromatic ones, which are carrots and celery. This dish does not have carrots and celery, so we'll skip to that. Then it goes to firmest to softest, and also considering driest to wettest. So we did peppers, which are firmer. Then we did mushrooms, which are softer, but they are drier than zucchini. Then zucchini, and then lastly, our tomatoes, which are our softest and our wettest. And that way they can all saute up nicely in our pan, get a good, good flavoring on them, and they don't wilt or ruin the others. I'm going to cut my tomatoes in half. That way they'll release their juices out at the final stage when we add them in. Add just a little acidity to the base of our sauce and our little bit of flavor. You could do, Roma tomatoes and dice them up as well. Let's get our salmon is just about to drop in. Let me feel my pan. Yep, it feels nice and hot. Let me grab some tongs here. Again, we're going to place these presentation side down. I'm going to take my fattest ones first. That way they can sit and rest the longest after, since we'll have the most time to cook. There. We can do these 3 first, and then we'll do the next 4 on there because I've got a fatter one on this one. Now, the nice thing when you cook salmon or fish, you can see as it cooks up, you can see the sides going up, and then we'll flip with this, flip it over, and then you can kind of watch. That's kind of the nice thing is you can see when the fish is cooked all the way through. So there's a lot less guessing than with that chicken or other, meats. And fish, always on a rule of thumb, cooks in a fraction of the time. Okay, let's get these mushrooms. Look at that. We've got some nice saute going on here. Now I'm going to give it just a little bit of salt to help release a little bit more of those mushroomy flavors in here. Let me grab my garlic salt. And the salt really just allows the liquid in the mushrooms to kind of release, which then allow them to saute a little bit nicer. So we got them right there. And then I'm going to prep up my fresh veggie or my fresh herbs that are going to go in as well. And then we'll have our starchy water for our sauce. We've got fresh basil here. Now you can definitely use dried herbs if you have them. If you don't have fresh is always gives you that nicer component to this, but it is not a necessity. Let's see, I'm going to save. I don't need quite all of this. So I've got a good handful of basil, and then I'll pull off a couple branches of oregano. Now if you are going to use dried is more flavorful in the sense that when you cook it longer, it's going to bring out more flavor than fresh because it's been dehydrated, but in volume after it's rehydrated, it will be more. So you would use a little bit less. So if I use a tablespoon of fresh oregano, I would use a teaspoon of dried oregano. Same thing. If I use, like 1/4 of a cup of fresh, basil, I would use more than like a tablespoon or a 1/2 tablespoon of dried basil. So it's not, you don't want to go equal parts fresh to dried because that flavor can be more intense if you do. Get these minced up. And then we're going to get ready to add our zucchini in. And then our salmon is looking pretty good, like we might be ready to flip it here. I can starting to see some crispy edges forming on the sides. There. But we're cooking it over just a medium heat on there. That way it will sear up. Let me grab my spatula. I'll take a quick peek at it. Looking good. Beautiful. Gorgeous. Now, one thing I will warn you is when you do flip with the skin, sometimes you get a pocket of liquid underneath the skin, which can cause it to splatter or pop up. So just be aware that sometimes it will do that. I've got a splatter guard, but it will just, there's just always a little bit of liquid in there and it will pop. And you just don't want to be standing right over that when it does. But you can't really remove the skin from it once unless you're really, you want to fillet it again. But when you cook it up, the nice thing about the skin, leaving the skin on, is it's going to leave you a juicier fish because it traps that moisture in on that side. So there's the benefit of having the skin on for it. But just be cautioned when you're doing a pan fry on it, there is that added risk of it kind of bubbling up and popping on you. Okay, we've got our zucchini going in. We'll let that saute. Now, I don't like to saute my zucchini so long that it gets mushy. It's one of those ones I add in towards the end because zucchini doesn't take very long for it to get tender and to soak up those flavors. They're like little delicious sponges of deliciousness. Let's get our fresh herbs here minced up so we can throw them in there with our tomatoes. And then we'll add a little bit of our starchy pasta water and add in those things for our little flavors. And then we'll be able to toss in our pasta. There we go. There we go. That should be nice. Let me take a peek here. Looking good. They look like they're cooked through all the way. So I'm going to turn this down. Let me grab a plate. And we can slide our round one off on here. Now, again, the reason why I picked my largest fillets first is these are kind of going to be my resting time, which means the larger ones will stay warmer longer, which means then when I serve everything, they should be nice and perfect by then. This one's running away from me. There we go. There we go. So there's our fresh herb salmon. Get this down. We're going to pop these guys in. Again, put it presentation side down first. There we go. I'm going to turn it down just a smidge. And we'll let that saute over. I can just rest that right here. Get our zucchini, a nice little toss here. But our vegetables are sauteing up nicely. There we go. You can see they're starting to get some nice kind of brown edges on them. Let's add in a little bit more garlic salt on the zucchini now. Just do it in stages. That way each gets a nice kind of release on them. Coat it up. And now we can add in some of our fresh herbs and our tomatoes. So we'll get all of those in here. And those fresh herbs will release out some of the fresh tomatoes will release out some of the juices.
I get a request to see the skin side after it's been cooked.
Yes. Let me give this a good stir and then I will lift those up. Okay. So our skin side is nice and crispy. And when I serve it, so some people like to eat the skin, we don't, but you just take your spatula and you should be able to slide it right between your fish and your skin. And you can see right here, I can pull it off and I can remove it, which is what I do for my kids because they don't like to eat this part there. But it'll be delicious. It keeps it really juicy and tender in there. But when you've done it, when it flips over, it should be nice and crispy on there. So some people really love the crispy skin. Okay, our vegetables are looking fabulous. Beautiful. You can see our fresh herbs. A turn. See how these are. I like to, I know when they're ready is when you kind of see them halfway up. This guy's ready. He's a smaller one, so he'll cook a little bit faster. But you can kind of see it approaching up on the side for your salmon. And so thicker fillets, of course, will take longer than thinner fillets, and thicker both in width as in depth. So it's kind of hard to judge how long a fillet will take, but you have to kind of just look at it and see and kind of take your time. Also, if you're cooking a big fillet, like, you know, in the oven, if you don't cut it into pieces, if you cook it big, that's going to take even more time than if you cut it into individual fillet, like into individual pieces. There we go. Beautiful. We got our nice little crispy edge on it. Gorgeous. We're going to add our little splatter on here. Let's go grab our sourdough out. Our vegetables are just about ready for us to add a little bit of our starchy liquid in and finish it off. So let's first go grab, I'm going to turn this down, our sourdough. Pop this over here so we're ready. So we did our 20 minutes at 500 and finished up 20 minutes at 450. So it's been in the oven for 40 minutes. And gorgeous. And this is, if you were with us yesterday was day one of it in the fridge. I whipped up, like kind of prepped up 3 sourdoughs at a time. This is day 2 in the fridge. And I always find day 2 in the fridge proofed is the best day. Day 1 doesn't give you quite as big of a ridge and a pop as day 2. Day 2 gives you that nice pop on that expansion score right here. So that nice, really beautiful pop there. Look at our nice kind of golden crust down there. So there's our beautiful little loaf there. Okay, let's see how my fish is just done here. I'm going to turn it off. Let's add in some of our starchy water here. Now what we're going to do is you're going to add right here where you have any little tasty bits on your pan, add just a little by little. Really bring up those flavors. Kind of bring them to. Don't just dump in all of your starchy water at one time because we're not sure if we're going to use it all. But we're going to just kind of scrape all of those caramelized spices and tasty bits from the bottom of our pan and bring them up. Gorgeous. Just stir. And once you can see as you mix it in and as it kind of heats, it thickens up a little bit because of that natural starch from the pasta water in there. But this will help make a nice velvety sauce. We'll let that heat for a second. I've put about a cup of that starchy water in, but I'm going to remove my salmon because it's all cooked. Let's see if we can slide these guys over. Okay. Beautiful. There is our crispy fried herby salmon. And now let me taste. I'm going to give a quick taste on this, and then we'll be ready to kind of toss in our pasta, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and then this part of our dinner is ready. But always taste this base first because it's harder to add in spices later. I'm going to add in a little bit of garlic salt. Actually, not garlic. Let me add this right here. Not garlic salt. I want to add in a little bit of chicken bouillon. We'll add a little bit more flavor, depth to it for it. And instead of using garlic salt, I can use the chicken bouillon to kind of flavor it. So we're going to add in about a teaspoon of chicken bouillon because I'm doing more of a lighter sauce here. So we're not going to use any cream or anything in there. So I want a nice depth to it. You've got that. I can taste the basil and the thyme in there, or the basil and the oregano. So let's mix this up. Here we go. I'm going to add a little bit more of my starchy pasta water. And then let's give this a good taste. Perfect. That was the missing ingredient. I don't think we need any more starchy water. So you see how I have just a small kind of puddle of liquid in here. You don't want too much because if you have too much, then you're going to have more of a soupy pasta dish. Don't worry if your pasta is all stuck together like that, because as soon as you start mixing it into your sauce, it's going to break apart. So you don't coat your noodles or anything with butter or oil because that will prevent them from soaking up all of this delicious flavor. I feel like that's kind of was our 90s knowledge. Coat your noodles in butter or olive oil so that they don't stick together. But if you're tossing them in your sauce and you store them in your sauce, don't do that because then it won't keep all that flavor in there. So here we're going to coat this up and then we are ready to serve up. I'm going to just sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan cheese over this so it can start to melt in, and then we can serve up some dinner. Beautiful. So I've got some shaved Parmesan cheese. I'll sprinkle that over the top. I'm going to stir it in, and that will just kind of slowly melt into our base from the residual heat. Adds a little bit of boldness to the flavor, but not too much. Okay, let's get dinner plated. Let me slide this over here. And let's grab a plate. Slide our sourdough over here. That still has to cool before we can cut into it. If you're new to making sourdough bread, it is not a bread that you can just cut as soon as you get out of the oven. It needs to sit for 10 minutes or so.
You have a question? What's the pasta dish called?
So this is a pasta in kind of a ratatouille. So we made a nice kind of vegetable medley that we tossed it in, and it has just a really light herby base a dish for it. We've got fresh basil, oregano, all of that deliciousness. Okay, so we're going to serve up. So we have our pasta with our zucchini, mushrooms, sweet peppers, tomatoes, and a nice, really herby sauce, kind of using fresh basil and oregano, garlic, and onions. So just a really fresh sauce. We're going to serve this up with our herby salmon that we seasoned also with fresh basil and oregano. I'm going to put a little bit of our fresh kind of herby basil and oregano paste on there with our lemon zest. Adds an extra bit of brightness to it. And we'll sprinkle a little bit of our Parmesan cheese on top of there for it to melt in. And of course, we will serve it up with a slice of our homemade sourdough bread for just a perfect and delicious dinner. Simple, light, but Easy. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these dishes at home, you can just go to that page, search for what we made. So our fresh herb salmon with our pasta in our, oh, I can't say, but our ratatouille sauce. I just keep thinking of the little mouse. And our sourdough bread. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets. We've got our saute pan, as well as our knives, cutting boards, all the different things we use in the kitchen. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.